Meet U.S. Marine Ray Garrison. He's that soldier most boys want to be when they grow up. A dangerous rescue mission in Kenya is no problem for him.
Roger that. Breaching now.
He's able to neutralize the terrorists without harming the hostage, and the whole thing is over in a few minutes. After such a successful operation, it's only fair that Ray takes a few days off. He decides to enjoy the Italian coast with his beautiful wife, Gina. But his vacation takes an unexpected turn when he wakes up alone.
Baby?
A note by the bed says Gina is only out to grab them some breakfast, but the sound of footsteps in the hallway tells a different story. Two armed men have just entered the hotel room. Of course, Ray is fully prepared to deal with such visits, but this time the surprise element gets the best of him. By the time he reaches the hallway, he's been injected with a paralyzing substance. The last thing he sees before blacking out is a cruel smile on the face of a stranger. Ray wakes up inside a walk-in freezer with a bag on his head, and that's not even the worst part. That same guy from the hotel hallway is there too, and he seems to think this is the perfect moment to show off his dance moves.
Never gets old.
His name is Martin Axe, and he wants to know who tipped off the Marines about the hostage situation. Ray says he has no idea, but Martin isn't convinced.
It's not gonna be okay.
He uses Gina to make him talk. Ray is desperate now, and he swears that he really doesn't know anything.
I can't answer because I don't know.
Martin says he believes him, which is why he has no use for this happy couple anymore, so he just executes them both. Wait, that's it? The end? Not really.
Bad news, baby.
Once again, Ray wakes up in a strange place. He's now a patient in the RST, Rising Spirit Technologies. So that means he survived, right? Wrong. As Dr. Harding explains to him, Ray's body was a donation from the US military to the lab. This is their first successful resurrection. Dr. Harding introduces his colleague KT, and they start a general assessment of their very own Frankenstein. Ray doesn't do so well in the memory part. He can't remember anything about his past, or even his own name.
Tell me, do you remember anything?
When he mentions a hypothetical family who could be worried about him, KT explains that all subjects are people who haven't been claimed by anyone. Totally ignoring how upsetting this is for Ray, Dr. Harding goes on with a cheerful tour around the lab. He explains that Ray hasn't only risen from the dead, but he's also some kind of superhuman now. All of his blood has been replaced by tiny robots called nanites.
Biomechanical constructs. We call them nanites.
They can fix anything that happens to his body, giving out a red glow during intense activity. The only bad news is that they need to be recharged from time to time, otherwise it's game over for Ray again. And now it's time to know more about the other RST residents. KT has an artificial respirator mounted in her clavicle since she survived a chemical attack. Tibbs lost his sight in an explosion and then got it back via camera feed into his optic nerve. Dalton is the proud owner of a superhuman pair of legs, and Harding himself is a former patient. After an aggressive cancer took his arm, he built himself a better one, finally realizing the hurricane of mixed feelings that must be devastating Ray's mind.
Welcome to the circus.
Dr. Harding tells him to get some rest. Will he be able to focus on his future?
Yeah.
His past doesn't seem ready to check out just yet. Some flashes of those last moments come back to him in a nightmare that wakes him up. So he hits the gym to try and relax. His first punch does a lot more damage to the bag than he expected, and then he decides to test his new fist against a concrete pillar. Why not? He also finds out that the dumbbells are a joke to him now, so he starts lifting the heaviest barbells as if they were maracas. But he's not the only weirdo training in the middle of the night. KT is in the pool, and her gracious movements almost outshine her ability to breathe underwater. Ray tells her about the nightmares and shares some of his concerns about the memory loss.
Wish you could forget it again.
She says he'll soon remember more and more. They're all damaged goods at RST, but they have learned to embrace that. In the kitchen, they toast to new beginnings. But at the first sip, something happens to Ray. He starts to relive those terrible last moments in detail, and he suddenly remembers it all. KT tries to stop him, but he steals a random truck in the parking lot and drives off. Dr. Harding is able to talk to him directly through the microprocessors in his brain, kindly reminding Ray that he is a multi-billion-dollar prototype. He urges him to turn around and get back to the lab at once. Claiming to have unfinished business, Ray just keeps going. The nanites give him unlimited access to pretty much anything online, including what should be classified. He uses that to download a manual and quickly learn how to fly a plane. Wow, this could be the end of YouTube tutorials. Meanwhile, in Budapest, who do we have here? Biting his nails nervously, it's Martin Axe. His convoy is crossing a tunnel when the first car collides with a huge truck, completely blocking the way. Ray comes out of the blue and starts to fire at the bulletproof windshield.
Sit down. My men will handle it.
One of the men takes him down right away, but Martin is still terrified because he seems to know what Ray is. He calls someone for instructions, but the guy doesn't help him much. His worst fears are confirmed when the mercs outside the car start screaming. Ray is alive and kicking, among other things. He's been hurt, but the nanites on the floor come swirling back to Daddy, while Martin stares in disbelief. Ray is walking toward him with a very determined look on his face. Martin starts to question how safe he is inside the car, understandably, and the merc says there's no way in hell Ray could get in this car. Of course, he does just that. As a last resort, Martin tries talking to Ray. He says this is a huge mistake, but Ray has no reason to listen, so he just pulls the trigger. The RST team is sent to pick up Ray and bring him back to the lab to recharge. He promises not to do anything like this again, but no one seems to care much except for KT.
Yeah, I'm done too.
And we find out why when they shut down all of Ray's motor functions at the lab. Just like all the classic villains we know and love, Dalton takes the opportunity to tell Ray all about their wrongdoings. It turns out that Gina is not even dead.
You really believe she's dead?
Those last 2 days of Ray's life were entirely made up by Eric, the tech guy at RST who's now making adjustments to the simulation. Not even the rescue mission was real. It was all part of the fiction designed to turn Ray into a weapon. His enemy's face changes into whoever is next on his hit list. When Dr. Harding starts to question KT's commitment, she snaps and says all of this is seriously messed up. He promises this is the last time. Their next target is Nick Barris, and Eric was able to locate him because of Martin's call from the car. So just when you thought these people couldn't get any worse, we find out that Ray's victims are actually former RST employees, including Martin Axe and Nick Barris. Apparently, Dr. Harding takes his own intellectual property a bit too seriously, so he needs to get rid of loose ends before going public with such game-changer tech. Eric initiates the simulation and everything happens again.
Can you bring that up?
Only this time, it is Barris who kidnaps the couple. KT obediently plays her part all the way. Everyone monitors Ray when he leaves the building to hunt down Barris and then flies a plane to England. What they don't know is that Barris is fully aware that Ray is coming to the address. He's actually counting on it. When an unknown vehicle is detected near the premises, he sends his men to the basement. There's a man named Wilfred Wiggins living there, and he goes upstairs with a mysterious case. At the RST, they watch the initial contact at the door. Ray calmly informs the security guards that he wants to see Nick Barris for revenge purposes. A few bullets after that, the guards believe he's really down and bring him inside just as he has planned. Eric is pleased to see this boy is so resourceful, but his chill attitude changes when he recognizes the man talking to Barris in the other room. Wilfred Wiggins is a legendary tech genius.
He's a techie just like me.
And he's telling Barris that he should have called him before. The device needs to be charged. He tells him which button to press, but he can only do that once it gets to 100%. Ray is already up and about now, so Barris gets hysterical. He tells his men to lock up Wiggins again. In the control room, Eric has more bad news. He has identified Wiggins' device, and it can produce an electronic magnetic pulse,
An EMP, an electromagnetic pulse.
which is pretty much the only thing that could stop Ray. Dr. Harding tries the communication channels, but something is jamming their signal.
He's muting you.
Luckily for them, Ray gets to Barris before the device is fully charged. He once again ignores the claims that this is a big mistake and pulls the trigger. That's a great relief for the team at the RST. But moments later, they lose signal completely all of a sudden. Via satellite, Eric says there's not a light on for miles. That's because Wiggins has pushed the button himself, killing the power and causing Ray to collapse. Fully equipped with a generator and having obviously planned this ages ago, he restarts the new gun with electrical shock. Then, they tell each other everything they know. Furious to learn he's been manipulated like that, Ray gives Wiggins some of the nanites for him to reverse engineer. This is a chance for both of them to regain freedom. With a phone that was inside the fridge during the pulse, Ray locates Gina and immediately drives there. As soon as he starts moving, Eric warns Dr. Harding. He sends Tibbs and Dalton to retrieve him in London, both heavily armed. Ray may be expecting them to do that, but he surely isn't prepared for what happens when he finds his beloved wife. Gina is alive and well, but she's not his wife anymore. What Ray is mentally processing is just a few days apart from each other are actually the last 5 years.
5 years.
and a baby girl. The poor man drives away, totally miserable. Maybe he needs a distraction, something like an RST war vehicle smashing his car all of a sudden. See, Gina's out of her mind now that he has to run away from Tibbs and Dalton and pretty much destroy half of London in the process. After a long and messy chase, Tibbs manages to insert a connection device into Ray and Dr. Harding shuts him down remotely. After they take him back to the RST lab, KT says she's had enough. She tells Dr. Harding that she won't be taking part in his crimes any longer. Then the good doctor turns off her clavicle respirator and watches her suffocate until she understands that walking out isn't an option.
Good girl.
The other employees look away to avoid her accusing stare. Now that's a really toxic environment at the workplace, right? Her next task is to eliminate Wiggins. That won't be so easy to do now that he's probably expecting an attack from the RST, not to mention that he's also a genius. Eric gives KT detailed information on his whereabouts and security system. But who needs to outsmart a genius if you had the right looks? Ignoring the advice from the guards, Wiggins takes his time giving attention to such a pretty lady, which of course is a mistake. Once he's out, there's still his security detail. She decides to deal with them with less charm and more brutally, and that works equally well. Meanwhile, Dr. Harding is having a little talk with Ray. Their surroundings are a bit unusual, and he explains it's a neutral space.
This is a neural space.
As if knowing that would make it less strange. Then he presses a button and a complete landscape is built around them. But Ray won't be so easily dazzled by such magic tricks. He knows Dr. Harding is assuming a good position to intimidate him. Since that approach fails, they decide to pull out the nanites from Ray's body and get him temporarily deactivated. But before they start, KT arrives, saying that Wiggins got away. We know that's not true, but Dr. Harding buys it and the nanite extraction is interrupted. They need Ray one more time to get Wiggins out of their way.
Wiggins got away.
While they start running the simulation, KT sneaks out into another room. Dr. Harding starts to see some crazy readings, and Eric says something's altering the simulation. When Harding figures out it must be KT, it's already too late. She's inside the simulation, and she has her own magic button to press. Then, in the van parked several floors down the same RST building, Wiggins is instantly granted access to their system. Now, Eric and Wiggins engage in a coding battle to lock each other out.
Okay.
And for an instant, Wiggins lets Eric believe he's won. But what he has actually done was helping release Ray from his wireless prison. While the smart people run for their lives, Dr. Harding has an employee in need of talking to. He tries the suffocating trick again, but of course, that's disabled by now. In fact, this is KT's chance to finally use her robotic parts with the purpose they were designed for, getting to the company servers. She starts to gas the whole floor, remaining unharmed herself. Over the comms, Wiggins begins to walk her through a complicated process of sabotage, only to realize that she's not listening at all.
Control, come on, burn the building down.
She prefers to destroy the servers the old-fashioned way. Dr. Harding puts Tibbs and Dalton after Ray, while Wiggins is also trying to get a hold of him. He sends him the coordinates to the van so they can leave as soon as possible, but Ray replies that he still has unfinished business. Now, Tibbs and Dalton are putting on something like a low-budget superhero suit, and then they start to hunt down their target. Soon, Ray is face-to-face with Dalton, who feels the need to damage the walls for no good reason. Just as in London, they start spreading destruction and mayhem while they fight. Not even the elevator is spared, as it crashes through the side of the building, leaving both Ray and Tibbs hanging by their fingertips. When Dalton gets to them, saving his friend Tibbs is not really a priority, so he proceeds to tear the cables, and Tibbs is the first one to go.
Dalton, what are you doing? Help me!
Ray grabs Dalton before the fall and punches the suit out of him on their way down. Now there is only one person still labeled as Ray's unfinished business. Dr. Harding is trying to leave the scene by car as if nothing special had happened here today. Certainly the building is not on fire right now, and when Ray catches up with him, he still insists on his backward philosophy. Instead of, running for his life, when the intellectual superiority fails, he grabs a very big gun.
Okay, fine.
That's a bit more effective, but the nanites just run back in no time. Now, Harding's only hope is that he runs out of battery before he gets too close. And it's exactly what happens. But who said you need all this tech to blow up stuff? So that's it with Dr. Harding. Again, Ray wakes up in a different place, only this time he remembers everything. KT is waiting for him outside, and he tells her that the only thing Dr. Harding was right about is that your past can't define your future.
We were doesn't have to define who we're gonna be.
Wiggins is also there, and not only as a third wheel, he's the only one to ask a very important question. Isn't this a little too good to be true? And this is the end. This was a recap of the 2020 movie Bloodshot by Columbia Pictures, starring Vin Diesel and Isa Gonzalez. So what do you think of the ending? Are they really free now, or is it still a simulation? Let us know in the comments below with #CinemaRecap. Until next time.